I'm Ralph Bradley. Better use the middle initial H because there are a couple other Ralph Bradleys running around, including a Ralph A. Bradley in Grand Island. Well, first of all, I was a senior at Benson High School in Omaha, and my brother was on Midway Island. And I thought, well, now I got to go and get in the fray and get those dirty Japanese who were after my brother. And my father talked me out of that, although I wanted to join the Marines first. And the Marines may not appreciate this, but he talked me out of it, and I'm glad he did. But it made me very conscious of what I wanted to do. And in December of '42, after I was graduated from Benson, I enlisted. So it made a big difference. Well, it made a big difference for everybody alive at that time. Well, when I enlisted in the Army Reserve one day and transferred to the Army Air Corps Cadet Program the next. I was not called to active duty until February of '43, and my basic training was at Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. It was just south of St. Louis. And I am not afraid to say it was the worst place I've ever been in my life. They had too many people there, not enough facilities. It was cold. One of the things they said, bring a mailing suitcase so that you don't have to have many clothes to send back home. Well, I had been a freshman at the University of Nebraska, so I went taking the Army Air Corps at its word with what they called a light jacket, an Angora sweater, a pair of trousers that a college kid would wear, and a pair of gloves, and a two-tone corduroy hat. They said we'd get our uniforms right away. We didn't. And marching in formation on what we called Jeep Hill when it was 3 below with just those clothes on. Our housing were clap shacks. You wouldn't put a dignified chicken in one of them. They were no heating, no interior walls. They would seat 8. They had bunks in there for 8 people. No windows. What light we could have was one light in the middle. We were heated by a little pot-bellied stove. What windows we had were just openings that were covered by plexiglass, not plexiglass, but that celluloid reinforced thing. And to get light, you had to throw up shutters. And they said, well, you have to scrub your floors every day. We soon found out that before we went to bed, and the pot-belly was keeping it just above freezing, we'd throw water on the floor. It'd freeze during the night, and we'd start the fire in the morning. It'd melt, and it looked like we had washed the floor. But it was terrible. I spent 17 days in the hospital there with pneumonia, and the meat wagons, the Army ambulances, were always taking young men out of there with meningitis, pneumonia, and so on. Walter Winchell, the guru of radio in those days, called it America's concentration camp. The Army Air Corps program was recruiting pilots, trainees for pilots, navigators, bombardiers, and so on. But everybody wanted to be that pilot. But we had seen the stories in the film about all the heroes and so on. So you took a battery of tests and so on, and to give whoever was making the choices some background. But when I was shipped out, I was shipped to a holding pen at Moorhead State Teachers College in Moorhead, Minnesota, because they had so many cadet nominees. There was no place to put them. The training schools were all covered and so on. And so we shipped up there. It's the first time I'd seen snow on May 10th, but nevertheless, it was an enjoyable time, except our group was lodged in a women's dormitory, and things were a little different in the latrines and so on than we were used to. So. The only place I was stationed outside the U.S. was at an airfield with the 8th Air Force, 100th Bomb Group at Thorpe Abbotts, England. It was about 20 miles south and a little bit west of Norwich. We were one of the closer fields to the North Sea. That's the only place that I was stationed outside of the United States. Fond memories. The flying crews were top dog, and so, but we had to praise the ground support people, the mechanics, the armament people, the doctors, and so on, who were very, very much in support of us. It's fun. I had 31 missions over Germany. I did not like being called to get up at 3 and 4 in the morning, or sometimes at 12:30, so that we could be over a target at 9 in the morning. One of the things about it, we had good food. We had a mess sergeant who knew how to take sea rations and make them palatable. Our commanding officer was a 26-year-old lieutenant colonel who insisted that if the evening meal was going to be chicken, the crews that were going to fly that day had the chicken for breakfast, and so on. So, but it was housing wasn't really great. We were back to the pot-bellied stoves, which was heated with British peat coal. But I enjoyed it, being on the ground there. I enjoyed the flying, but I was scared all the time, of course. Anybody who tells you they weren't scared has to be lying. The side of the base probably had about 3,500 personnel on it, covering all bastions of what a combat base should be. We had just 2 runways that crossed. One of them was shorter than the other, and we almost always took the same runway. Weather during the winter of 44 and 45 was not very conducive to flying. I often laugh on the news media now that the weather wasn't good for flying here. And we would take off in fog. We could see 2 runway lights ahead of us. One B-17 on one side of the runway, one B-17 on the other side. As soon as that first B-17 hit that second runway light, the other one took off, started its flight. You'd be flying in the fog, and you had to fly a certain pattern. If not, because there were about 1,500 other planes up in a small area, you could feel the prop wash in that fog and wonder where that so-and-so is. In our clubs, either officers club or enlisted men's club or wherever, we had stoplights. red, amber, and green, and be around. And early in the evening or the night before, if you had a red light going, you were going to fly. Amber or orange light, somebody hadn't made up their mind yet. And if green, you weren't going to fly. That did not always hold true. Been up playing cards until midnight with a green light in our minds, and at 12:30 they come around and say, "You're flying." So then we would get up, we would have to take care of shaving, washing up and so on, and have breakfast and report at a briefing room at such and such a time. They would come in and they'd open up a curtain which would show Germany and the target areas, but always hanging on the outside of this curtain was, at least at our base, was red yarn. And if there was a lot of yarn hanging down, we know it wouldn't be very far in. But if you look over there and see there wasn't much yarn left outside, you know, figure, well, it's going to be time. And then you would pick up your parachute and your flight gear and so on and be hauled out to the plane, and I'd have to pre-flight guns and my bomb sight, check the bomb racks and so on. Everybody had their job, the pilot checking engines and that kind of stuff, to get ready to take off. And then at the time for taxiing, if we were going to go, they'd fly from our control tower green flares. Then if they flew red ones, the mission was scrubbed. The Norden was a mechanical computer based upon gyros, which would hold your optics perpendicular to the. It also was attached to what we called the C1 automatic pilot. So on the bomb run, the person on the site doing the calculations with the mirrors and having the right RPM on the small motors in there would control the plane. He could turn it, everything. So it was a marvel. It was absolutely a marvel, and so on. I don't know if you've seen some pictures of bombardiers, but always have a big black ring around. That was from the sight protector. Okay. And the reason you use the left side is because all of your controls are over here. And if you had over here on the right side, you wouldn't be able to see it. Well, it became part of our history in September of '44 when we joined the 100th Bomb Group at Thorpe Abbotts. The plane had been used and it was assigned to us. So it just became part of our lives and so on. When we crash landed in St. Tron, Belgium, we left it there. It had all shot up and it needed outer wing panels and new controls and new nose and tail surfaces and everything else. We just left it. We counted the holes in the plane and we stopped at 200. But luckily, we did not collect a Purple Heart, and that was really great. I don't think there are over maybe 10 or 12 B-17s that are flying. The one in the background was one of the original planes in our 100th Bomb Group. It does not have the designation there now. It has a C on it, which designated the 96th Bomb Group. Ours was the D, the 100th Bomb Group. And every time I come here, it gripes me just a little bit to see the sea there. Our pilot, Harold Schreier, was a operations officer at Tyndall Field, Florida before he was assigned to a crew. My co-pilot, my navigator, and I were 19 years old. Our top gunner, John Owens from Oklahoma, was 31. Our tail gunner, DeLeo, had been in the service for a while. I'm still in touch with the armor gunner and waist gunner. He had been a policeman in downtown Manhattan. And the ball turret man was a young kid out of New Jersey, our radio man out of Erie, Pennsylvania. There were 4 of us left out of the 9 who were flying as a combat crew.